With my beloved husband, we welcomed our adorable child into the world. But my mother-in-law, as I will refer to her, had the nerve to say our child was not cute. Can you imagine saying such a thing about your own grandchild? To make matters worse, she treated me like an unwanted intruder. Well, two can play at that game. This is a tale about a self-centered, horrendous mother-in-law and a daughter-in-law who fights back. My name is Viola. I married my husband Elwood when I was 28. We were blessed with our long-awaited son, Ricky, just a year ago. I went back to work when Ricky was half a year old, placing him in a daycare center while I focused on my job. Some might frown upon that, leaving a baby that young in daycare, but there was a reason behind it. My husband's company wasn't doing so well, and his salary had gradually decreased since we got married. In fact, I'm now earning twice as much as he is. With a newborn child, expenses were only going to increase. With that in mind, I decided to return to work, sooner rather than later. I've never disliked my job, so returning wasn't a problem for me. However, there was one person who wasn't pleased with my decision. That person was my husband's mother, my mother-in-law. She had moved in with us 3 months prior. She didn't seem to like me much, not only criticizing my parenting, but also complaining about my day-to-day activities. How could you leave such a small child in a daycare center? You're unfit to be a mother. It's always been the norm for a woman to stay home and protect the household, hasn't it? Good grief, what century are we in? She kept insisting on this outdated notion. The moment I came home from work with our son Ricky, she'd start, "You're working late again? Don't you feel sorry for Ricky?" I do spend all day with Ricky on my days off. He's settled in the childcare center, so it's okay. But when I tried to argue, she'd furrow her brows angrily. "Well, you're just taking the word of the childcare workers. If you keep this up, the kid won't grow up right." My mother-in-law, for short, who doesn't even take care of Ricky, would boss me around about parenting from her high horse. On top of that, she had no problem attacking my character. "I regret living with a daughter-in-law like you, who only thinks about work. I wonder why my son Elwood married such a woman. I'm going crazy from stress every day." This time, even I had had enough. If it's that bad, should we stop living together? You know why we decided to live together, right? There was a reason mother-in-law started living with us in our house. Originally, she lived in her husband's home. But one day, her husband had a traffic accident and became paralyzed from the waist down. In addition, it was discovered that he had dementia, and mother-in-law could no longer take care of him, so she put him in a care facility. She then insisted that we move in with her, but both my husband and I had work. Considering our commute, it was impossible for us to move from our current house. Then, one day, mother-in-law moved her stuff to our house without warning and just settled in. In the end, this living arrangement wasn't agreed upon. Mother-in-law just moved in on her own. It's what you might call an unwelcome cohabitation. Look, I understand that things are tough for you because of my father-in-law. That's why I agreed to this living arrangement. But remember, we promised not to interfere with each other, right? Huh? Did we? I can't remember something from so long ago. Even when I reminded her of our promise, mother-in-law was riding high, perhaps confident that she wouldn't be kicked out. Her attitude was really getting on my nerves. Enough is enough! I agreed to live with you because we promised not to interfere. This is not what we agreed on. Oh, you're so noisy. Why can't you be cuter? Like Cecil. She's such a good, obedient girl. Cecil is my brother-in-law's wife. From my perspective, she's my sister-in-law, and she also has a bad personality. It's better to say that she's cunning, rather than having a bad personality. As soon as she married my brother-in-law, she became a housewife, and was very liked by my mother-in-law. Mother-in-law would invite her to our house without our permission, and they'd talk behind my back. Listen to this, Cecil. Viola is still working, you know. Oh my, really? Ricky is still so small. Can't believe she can do that. Right? Right? Unlike you, who is smart enough to become a full-time housewife after getting married. I don't have to worry about when you have a child. I respect you, mother-in-law, so I'll do my best. Such petty squabbles would go on and on. To my displeasure, they would intentionally converse in loud voices within my earshot. I despised them from the bottom of my heart. Gradually, to curry favor with my mother-in-law, Cecil began to speak ill of me of her own accord. You know, doesn't my brother-in-law make about the same salary as my husband? Yet, you're still working too. Could it be that you're terrible at managing money? Perhaps a few years ago, my husband did earn the same as my brother-in-law, but now his earnings have dipped below that. I hadn't mentioned to them about my husband's company's deteriorating financial situation, partly due to my pride. It's become routine now that whenever Cecil talks trash about me, my mother-in-law joins in, gleefully. Right? It's shocking to think she blames others for her poor financial management and childcare responsibilities. Cecil, you must never become a wife like her, okay? Of course not. I respect you so much, ma'am. Oh, Cecil, you're such a sweetheart! I cringe at their exchange of superficial compliments. I wish they'd take it somewhere else. It's just adding to my stress. I felt the limit of living with my mother-in-law and decided to talk to my husband about it. It's about your mother. She keeps inviting Cecil over every day to belittle me. Huh? Mom does? Since I usually come home earlier than him, my husband had no idea about the harassment. Predictably, he looked puzzled. Yes, she does. She promised not to interfere, but she's been complaining about me continuing to work. Cecil joins in, and they go on and on insulting me. I can't take it anymore. My husband thought for a while, and then said something outrageous. Whoa, but Cecil seems to get along well with Mom, right? Maybe you should try to meet Mom halfway too, Viola. What? Were you even listening to me? She's denying my entire being, you know? How am I supposed to get closer to someone like that? As I pressed him, my husband scratched his head in annoyance. Don't get so worked up. Just try to emulate Cecil for now. I'm sure Mom will warm up to you too. What does that even mean? You want me to flatter her like Cecil does? I've had enough. I was a fool to ask for your help. I felt utterly alone. Frustration welled up in me before the anger did. The snide remarks from my mother-in-law and sister-in-law continued as usual the next day. As I began preparing dinner after coming home, I heard this. Are you planning to make another half-hearted dinner today? I'm tired of your lazy cooking. That's because she insists on working, you know. If it were up to me or my mother-in-law, we would never serve our husbands such low-quality meals, right? For the record, my mother-in-law's cooking is nothing to brag about. It's overly seasoned and not that delicious. As for my sister-in-law, her homemaking skills are quite evident given that she practically lives at our place. While cursing them inwardly, I silently proceeded with my dinner preparations. When my husband came home, both my mother-in-law and Cecil changed their attitudes drastically and stopped picking on me. Because of this, my husband couldn't trust what I said. Just when things were like this, an incident happened. Out of nowhere, I got a call from the childcare center during my work shift. I hurriedly contacted my husband and rushed home. There, my mother-in-law and my teary-eyed son were waiting. What on earth do you think you're doing, mother-in-law? How could you just take Ricky away from the childcare center without my consent? When I shouted in anger, my mother-in-law sighed as if she was tired of it all. She looked at me with condescending eyes. What's all the fuss? I did it for my grandson. Paying for a childcare center is a waste of money. Raising a child is a mother's job, isn't it? But that's just your opinion, right? We have reasons to send Ricky to the childcare center. It's inexcusable for you to just take him without permission. It's no different from kidnapping. Kidnapping? Are you kidding me? even though he's my grandson? It doesn't matter that he's your grandson. You disregarded the teacher's warnings and just took him. That's kidnapping. No matter how clearly I made my point, she simply shrugged it off. Then she said something unbelievable. What nonsense! To begin with, neither you nor your son are cute. If you have any complaints, just get out. She didn't think my son, her own grandson, was cute? At that moment, a huge red flag went up in my mind. To call her own grandson not cute in front of him? We can't live with this woman any longer. I'll never forgive her for insulting my precious son. I swore to myself to protect him, no matter what. At that moment, my husband arrived home. I immediately broke the news to him. Elwood! It was your mother who took Ricky from the childcare center. I've reached my limits. I can't live with her anymore. Suddenly, my mother-in-law played the victim and started pretending to cry. Listen! Elwood! Can you believe what Viola is saying? She's accusing me of kidnapping. I just want to pick up cute little Ricky. That's all. Isn't it horrible? Just picking him up? I got heated at her words. Stop joking around. You just said that my son is not cute. You told me to get out. This is our house, not yours. Are you just pretending to be a good mother in front of my husband? Elwood, please help me. Viola is always picking on me. Watching my mother-in-law cry out to my husband, I felt as if everything was ridiculous. If my husband were to side with this woman with her poor acting, at that point, I decided it would be just my son and me. We'd forge ahead together. The first to break the silence was my husband. First, I want to talk with Viola. Mom, please return to your room. My husband, who always sided with his mother, made her eyes widen in surprise with this statement. What are you saying? There's no need to listen to Viola, right? Can't you see I'm suffering? This involves Ricky too. That's why I want to have a proper conversation with Viola, as his parent. My mother-in-law looked unsatisfied the entire time, but probably didn't want to upset my husband, so reluctantly agreed. Afterward, my husband and I spent hours discussing the incident and everything leading up to it, eventually coming to a conclusion. A few days later, we decided to tell her the outline of what we discussed. Mom, sorry to keep you waiting. We finally come to a decision. My husband spoke to my mother-in-law with a smile. Seeing my expression, mother-in-law must have been convinced that her son was on her side. She started chattering excitedly. So, you're finally breaking free from Viola, huh? Without even considering what I had just said, mother-in-law was over the moon. She called my brother-in-law and his wife, and, like always, began bad-mouthing me. Wow, what a relief! Today, we finally get to say goodbye to Viola. Right, Viola? To her question, I responded with a smile. Of course. Well then, hurry up and leave, and take that not-so-cute kid who looks just like you with you. This house is going to be for me, Elwood, Derek, and Cecil from now on. Bye! Then my husband, who had been silent up until that point, slowly spoke up. Let's go, Viola. Excuse me. Let's go, Elwood. What? What? Mother-in-law seemed to be struggling to understand, repeating what several times. My husband and I started packing our belongings, preparing to leave with our son. That's when mother-in-law stopped us. Wait, Elwood! What's going on? We're going to live in this house, together, right? What are you talking about? My husband turned to mother-in-law with a cold stare. I'm leaving with Viola. I can't put up with your delusions any longer. Mother-in-law trembled, then collapsed. Why? Why would you side with her? I heard everything from the childcare center teacher. How you kidnapped Ricky without permission, how you yelled at the childcare workers, how you slandered Viola at the center. Everything. That's... I never thought you could sink so low, Mom. Surrounded by people who only listen to you.
You really messed up. Enjoy your life."
With that, my husband said,
"Let's go,"
and pushed me out of the house. Until the end, mother-in-law called out to him, crying. On the way to our new place, my husband apologized.
"I'm sorry, I didn't realize sooner. I hope you can forgive me."
What are you talking about? You taking action now is more than enough. I smiled at my husband. Yes, the fact that he believed me over mother-in-law this time was the most comforting thing. Since then, we've cut off contact with mother-in-law and my brother-in-law's family and regained our peaceful daily life. After we canceled our lease on the house, mother-in-law, with nowhere else to go, apparently moved in with my brother-in-law and his wife. With the addition of mother-in-law and the pressure she put on their living expenses, my brother-in-law's income wasn't enough. As a result, Cecil had to get a job, and now mother-in-law is alone at home. There's no one for her to badmouth or to share in the bad-mouthing. Even with Cecil, who used to be her best buddy, they now argue constantly.
"I have to work because of you, mother-in-law. Give me a break."
"What? It's my fault? Get out of here, you old hag!" Hearing the real Cecil, her husband seems to have lost his feelings for her. I heard they're in the middle of a divorce. She used to have a lot of free time to act cute in front of my husband, but now that she's working and often irritable, her true colors have shown. No matter how dire their circumstances become, I have no intention of ever interacting with mother-in-law again. From now on, my husband, my son, and I will work together to build a happy home.